What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Turn the Jets podcast. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Coming up here, 4-year anniversary since starting to host this pod. My first ever pod was debating Joe Caporoso about whether the Jets should keep Sam Darnold. And Joe, I love you. What was I cooking? Because Sam Darnold, 10 of his 12 or 13 starts this year, over 100 passer rating. And, the Vikings are cooking. More importantly, the Jets played the Seahawks yesterday, Jets find another way to lose, 26-21. Dan Essien and Michael Meegan, two of Badlands' finest, are joining me today. Meegs, we'll start with you, and then Dan, how we doing? Was yesterday? What were the emotions yesterday? Any anger, any upsetness, or you're just like, get me to January 8th?
Yeah, send to end is like the big overarching theme for me at this point, but it is very funny that even though when they went up, the Seahawks had those two special teams errors, and you were like, I still think they're going to find a way to do this, and then the pick six happens, and you're like, oh, they're going to really find a way to do this. And did it they may. Another chance for a fourth quarter, game-winning drive goes awry, and, we're back here. 5 more to go.
Dan, how we doing?
Completely numb. I think I think post pick six, you're kind of just like, okay, just let me let my body go, just float into it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, Oli looks good. Oh, Will McDonald, and you're just locking into the future positives, because otherwise you're just gonna lose your mind. I think with this team.
I want to touch on the game a little bit, and then we're going to talk a little bit more of some of the big picture questions, some of the things that have kind of happened around the organization, around the team in the last couple of days. From the actual game perspective, I thought Rodgers looked the most mobile. Honestly, probably he's been all year, even Patriots game included. Like, he was moving really, really well. Now, weirdly enough, he started moving well, and everything else kind of didn't look right, which was really odd. Like, even some of the accuracy, it almost felt like he forgot that he could move really well for a second, and then he finally did, and he had the lead block. And I was pretty excited, frankly. I thought good chance he wasn't coming back. I don't know, 75-25 going to the game. I'm at 0% or 1%. He's back next year, and we'll talk about that. But there were some encouraging signs early on. And my biggest thing with the Jets this year is there's 2 to 3 plays. Sometimes it's just one, but you can go to every game. There's 2 to 3 plays. It's we could go week by week. The Niners game, it's the Brees fumble. The game was over. I know they eventually went up, but the game was over. Sure, maybe it was the interception that gets tipped. Week 2, week 3, they obviously win. Week 4, it's pretty obvious the goal line stand, it was over. Right after that, the game totally flipped. Week 5, the pick 6, very similar on the exact same fucking blitz package that the Seahawks ran that they stole from Brian Flores, and it worked seamlessly. Andrew Van Ginkel and Leonard Williams pick 6s against Aaron Rodgers. I think he has like 5 or 6 in his whole career, and of course 2 are this year. But the punt return against New England, there's just very clear breaking points in games where the Jets crater. And Rodgers was a totally different player after the missed throw to Garrett. More annoyingly was the pick 6. Not only has he seen that blitz before, but I would say comfortably 99 times out of 100, Rodgers hits Conklin for a touchdown on that play and doesn't think twice. And it's like, holy shit, man. Like, he's going to make this really difficult for Jets fans and the Jets organization to cut him or to let him retire or trade him for a conditional pick. And then obviously the game implodes, and we'll touch on some of the other things. What did you guys make of Rodgers yesterday? And like, were you excited a little bit in the beginning? I think I texted in our group chat. I was like, is anyone else enjoying this? Because like, it was kind of cool for 20 minutes. It was like, whoa, like he looks mobile, fun. There's a good defense. And it was kind of fun. And then it all obviously fell apart in, Jets fashion.
Yeah, I'll let you go. I'll go last on this.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, and I think this is part of why they're saying, well, at least publicly so far, that like, we kind of want to let him play the rest of the season. The more you get things that you're like, oh, we haven't had this from Aaron yet, the more, leadership is going to be like, well, okay, hold on then. Like, let's see what it really is. Because there's always like a little hint that like maybe we haven't seen the full picture yet, right? I feel like some of that is a little bit of a reaction to our past, just because we haven't had like good quarterback play in so long. They're just like, man, if there's literally anything here, please can we just have it for a little bit, but yeah, I think the mobility was pretty encouraging, but yeah, the accuracy not catching up to that. Again, this is one of those things where like, okay, maybe the accuracy will be there next week. Game doesn't really mean anything anyway. Let's just see what's there, and they will get to see. So we will know at least.
Yeah, I mean, for me with Rodgers, and of course, like with the day he's moving the best was probably the worst. The interior of the O line probably looked
right
there. Like, of course, like again, if you could say one thing about this entire team is they are never complementary when they need to be. It's always one week one unit's fine, the other week unit's bad, and there's never any consistency to it. So of course that happened, and I think the weird thing, or the thing that frustrates me the most about Rodgers at this point, is that he plays so much like a young quarterback, where when he hits a couple throws and he starts to feel it, like you can tell he becomes such a confidence player, and you're like, oh, that was a little bit of a heat check. Like, this one to Devontae went well. Oh, Garrett got open. Like, and then just one thing happens, and it's kind of like Sam used to be this way, where like once he made that first dumb mistake, he just starts second guessing it. It completely goes. And the thing that bothers me is that I don't think Todd Downing's like a fantastic play caller, but I do think he's been fairly solid. Is like if he just gives into the motion and the system and just admits to himself that like, hey, you're a little bit more at this point in your career like those Shanahan-y quarterbacks that you would like to make fun of, saying like the holes in this offense are because these quarterbacks can't really play and I can play, so why are you putting the training wheels on me? If he just accepted that, you probably could get more out of him. Especially like at this point, the season's over. Like he's banged up, he can't move, and that is a restriction. You see, like look how Cousins looks in Atlanta. Like now, it's just like when you can't move, it's just so hard to play in this league. Like that's why, like I don't think it's gonna happen. Like I don't think he's gonna play somewhere else next year. I think he is gonna retire. But like if he can admit to himself that he's at a different point in his career, I can understand why people will be like afraid of the resurgence. But Aaron Rodgers, because he's so good and has those MVPs, part of it is because of his ego, and I don't know if he's ever going to be able to admit that that's where he is at this point.
Yeah, the one thing I think also yesterday that, and it's in a, like, very similar to the breaking point stuff, the timeout issues, some of the dumb penalties, all those things we've seen all year, and that's a lot of coaching. That's why I always laughed where it was like, no, it's not the coach, but like, it's like, well, they're undisciplined. They have bad clock management and they're not ready to play. I'm not really sure what else a head coach does in the NFL if you don't call plays, other than hire the staff that also is not doing a good job.
Right.
Rodgers, and I guess this is a product of getting older, it's just throw by throw, Meeks, as you just mentioned, drive by drive, half by half, quarter, like any metric you want to, whatever you want to break it down to, you have no idea what you're getting. What Rodgers did to buy time to get Davis to leak out there on the 3rd and 25. I know it's a dump off, but like that's awesome. And you're like, wow, they got this. And he gets Devontae quickly on the hitch, and you're like, they might actually win this game. Like they had more than enough time. They had the 2 timeouts, and then immediately trash. I don't really know what Brees and Garrett were doing on that one. They kind of ran into each other, and I know it wasn't really targeting, but even like the DPI, the throw Rodgers made on the OPI was one of the 3 best throws he's ever made as a Jet. And if it gets called back, and then he just like throws a random go ball to like Malachi Corley. Like, I don't know what we're doing there, but my point being, that's what's frustrating. And I don't know that this offense can operate in right now, this high variance. Like we have no idea play to play what you're going to do. And I'm not advocating to bench Rodgers in the aspect of that. I just, at the end of the day, and we could transition to the bigger picture here is like, there was a lot of talk around Garrett and Brees and Sauce and these young guys, and there's the extension talks and all that stuff. I think making Garrett feel warm and fuzzy going into the offseason about, hey, here's I don't know, what, they have 5 left. Here's at least 35 targets to get you over 1,000. The one good thing, spin zone, Rodgers not being on the same page with Garrett all year might have saved the Jets like $4 million a year, because Garrett otherwise probably have 1,800 yards this year, and we'd be talking about $36 million a year. What do you guys make of the young player stuff and some of the conversation around like, are they going to be tired of the Jets and the whole thing? Like, do you buy into that, or is that a lot of like just in-season frustration with hey, we're 3-9 and like this was supposed to be a fun year.
I think part of it is that, like I said, I think I've made this point on a couple podcasts. All these kids were told was like, Zach Wilson let you down. You guys are fantastic. Like, if we get someone here who can just be a guiding hand, like, we're going to win and it's going to be sick. And it wasn't. And you can tell, like, the emotional toll that it's taking on, like, someone, especially like Brees. Like, I felt really bad for Brees yesterday because I don't think he's been 100% really this season. And it just really feels like so much of his mistakes are now mental. Like, I remember, like, he got one target, and there was that pass where it wasn't a good throw. Like, he had to dive to get it, and if he caught it, he couldn't really run with it. But, like, and then it still goes down as a drop. And then, of course, like, the kids waited, like, 2.5 quarters to get the targeted for the first time, and then that's what he gets. And then he doesn't get anything for the rest of the game. And, like,
yeah, his confidence is shot right now.
Yeah.
I think.
And I was happy Sauce, before his injury, actually rebounded and actually was like, you went up against a receiver who is close to the upper echelon level with DK Metcalf and kept him in check, which we have seen. So that was, I think, big for his confidence. Garrett really, I think Garrett's the one who, is probably the least emotional of the young players, where it doesn't people get on him because he visibly seems frustrated, but I don't think it ever really affects his play. Like, I don't think he mentally checks out of games. So he's the one I feel the most confident about, that it really isn't going to bother him. I'm sure the new regime should go with him for an extension. He should be the first one, I think, to get it from that class. But at the end of the day, like, if you get the right coach who can fix people's confidence, I'm sure they're going to really enjoy playing here.
Yeah, I do think that pretty much all these players are going to wait and see what happens with the next coaching staff, because I honestly think that Garrett was the one player that I was concerned with how much patience he would have for this rebuilding period, or for a potential rebuilding period if it didn't work out with Aaron Rodgers. And as much as he was pretty like frustrated early on, I think a lot of what he's been saying lately has been a lot of like, I just got to see it through. Like, we just got to get better, and I'll figure out a way for it to get better for everybody. Like, so if he's, I mean, first of all, kudos to him if that's the kind of position he wants on this team, is like, cool, I'll just fix it. Like, I understand now that I shouldn't have, expected somebody else to do it, and I have to do it now, so that'd be great. But I think a lot of them are, a lot of it would be like, hey, what's the next staff going to look like? What are they going to put in front of me in terms of, development and stuff like that? Because they understand that there is a long way to go now.
Yeah, I think, look, picking up Jermaine's option. I'm not touching an extension until, honestly, probably after. Like, he's a guy that I think I got to see what the Achilles looks like over even potentially a year and a half before I'm touching an extension on a.
He might not get that option picked up, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I'm just like, I don't know that I'm not rushing. Jermaine was always going to be the one guy I felt like I just have that class, and this is obviously a discussion more for the offseason, but I always felt like he was the one that was hard to figure out. Brees, to me, and I know you guys have said it, Connor said it, I'm sure Joe has said it. I've said it a bunch. Brees, to me, is the easy in the offseason. You go to Brees and say, we're going to basically guarantee your 2 years of your franchise tag, whatever that would be. You don't have to worry about it being a year-by-year thing. You'll have 3 more years remaining on your deal, including next year and going forward. You'll be a 27-year-old that we've seen 27-year-olds in Saquon Barkley get paid, who've played out both years of the franchise tag. We're going to take away the drama of this. It's kind of a happy medium for both people. You'll get compensated, fairly. It's a lot of guaranteed money for a back. Brees is playing through a lot right now. From my understanding of what's going on there, I'm not really sure why he's. I wouldn't be mad at the Jets if they sat Brees for a week or two and said, like, let's just. You got to save him from himself. He's a competitor. He wants to play. His confidence is shot right now, and he's not healthy at all. And that Colts game, he definitely got hurt. I don't think anyone realized it. I didn't realize it either. But there's stuff there. The Sauce and Garrett thing, maybe you wait on Sauce a year to see how it goes, depending on the scheme you play and how he looks, and a full year of buy-in. But if they hire we'll talk about in a minute, from the coaching perspective, if they hire any of the guys, at least that I think that are on pretty high on all of our lists for them to hire, I have no qualms that Sauce will not be an all-pro player again in 2025. Garrett, I'm the second whoever the GM is hired, I'm going to Garrett and saying, will you take 3 for 1 or 4 for 120 or somewhere in that? I don't know. You can give or take whatever, a couple million on either side. I'm sure there's beating Brandon Ayuk's deal, probably not touch it. You're not going to touch CD and Jamar's deal without being an all-pro. But it's like, hey, I know you're frustrated. And in 2 years, we can revisit this. But like, will you take $30+ million a year to just like be happy for at least 6 months? And the offense is going to be centered around you. You're going to be a captain of this team. You're going to be a face of the franchise guy, all that stuff. Like, you're in New York. I know it sucks right now, but like, we're going to get it figured out. Trust us. And try to get that locked up. Because if you can at least get Garrett done, it gives you confidence. Sauce will get done. It gives you confidence they can figure out Breece. I just feel like Garrett and Breece this offseason are more paramount because the offensive struggles have been a problem. Whereas defensively, if you're Sauce, like, you're not getting this type of marketing deal. And I know that stuff's overblown a little bit because Mahomes is on every commercial. But like, dude, Sauce in anywhere else in the country is not Sauce Gardner on all these different commercials. You're a cornerback who I love, but like,
on commercials, like
if you have 3 interceptions in your career, like it's not like you're not that guy, right? So I want to talk a little bit. There's a couple other conversations I want to have here, but I want to talk head coaches. I want to have you kind of give your top 5 in terms of your preference in terms of who the Jets would bring in. This can be realistic. It can be unrealistic. It's whatever, however you want to do it. I'll give mine and I'll do my explanation at the end. My list has kind of been the same for a while now, and I don't know if it'll change unless there's firings. Mike Vrabel to me is one, and I think we're all kind of aligned or somewhat aligned there. I just think that what this organization needs is a coach who, frankly, isn't scared to go and say, Woody, I'm not doing that. And even if it's not, not back down from him, but, not be disrespectful. He's not going to back down from him. I think he's a guy who's won big games on the road, who's developed people. He's hired good staffs. He'll get the best out of Sauce. He'll bring the best out of a Michael Carter, a Quentin Williams. I think he's kind of what this team needs, especially in that, like, solid let these guys police themselves. And I understand that that's a good thing in a lot of ways. Mike Vrabel will police you. And I think that at some level, this team needs a little bit of an ass kicking from that perspective. So Vrabel would be one for me. Liam Cohen would be 2. He's the only offensive name I'm going to have on my top 5 at the moment. There's only a few offensive coordinators I would entertain the Jets that are not experienced. Liam Cohen's lack of experience is my biggest concern, but worked in college, worked in the NFL, has worked in the NFL. McVay tree, but not siloed into like a McVay role where he's never done anything type of thing. I'm very weary of like even the Zach Robinson types in that sense. 3 for me is Jesse Minter. I think he's the least realistic of the 5 candidates that I'm going to present because if you're Minter, you're going to have the pick of the litter and he's 41. This isn't like a retread job for him, or this isn't, I got to strike while the iron's hot. Like, he's a Harbaugh guy. He's going to probably have offers every offseason. 4 for me would be Brian Flores. Brian Flores, I think could be really high upside, but the floor to me is really scary if they have a young quarterback. I just don't know, but I would assume he's learned if you bring a McCown, does that really excite you and all that? And then 5 for me would be Aaron Glenn. I like Glenn. He knows the market, knows ownership, has done great jobs in 2 organizations. Meegs will probably touch on this a little bit. There's slight concern for me. Is the Lions stuff repeatable elsewhere? And I know Meegs this is a Meegs theory that I fully agree with. I'm a little concerned. We saw it in New England. We've seen it in LA. Sometimes you just try to, like, everyone tried to be the Yankees and for a long time in the late 90s, and like no one was going to be it. Just be your own. Like, the Yankees are now trying to be the Rays, and it doesn't work because they don't have the same infrastructure. Meegs, I'll let you go, and then Dan, thoughts on the list, and then how does your list kind of stack up in that sense?
So our lists are fairly similar. I think we have people in the same roles. I think so much of my list is that it's very hard to make this list in a vacuum where it's just like, where I don't think like, would he take the job? Is he going to be interested in this one? So like, it's very hard to like pick 5 names because like, I'm sure if everything was in a vacuum, you were like, who are the best 5 head coaching candidates? I'm sure Ben Johnson would be on all our lists. No one on this podcast thinks Ben Johnson might not even interview with the Jets, let alone take the job. So like, he's basically like been completely removed.
Are we sure he's going to leave at all?
I don't know. Like, I feel like if he doesn't take the Bears job,
it's one of the weirdest things.
Yeah.
Amon-Ra's like, why is he leaving? Like, how do we know he's even leaving? I'm just like, I know he's Amon-Ra and he talks a lot, but like, it is interesting. Whatever. Sorry, continue. That's a weird one.
Yeah.
Everyone assumes he's leaving. Are we sure?
I don't know. Adam Gase was his mentor. God knows what he could do. But like I said, like that's the point for me where it's like I said, Ben Johnson would be on my list, but like I don't entertain him seriously. Like I think Brian Flores would be pretty high on my list, and I'd probably have him probably closer to 2. But like, are people going to hire Brian Flores because the lawsuit still exists? Like, unfair or unfair? Like, I think he got a raw deal in Miami. I honestly think that firing has only gotten worse for them because you fired him because he wasn't nice to Tua. Now you hired a guy who's basically butt buddies with Tua, and look how it's going. They're 1-14 against teams that have made the playoffs. Everyone they tried to bring in Vic Fangio last year to like toughen them up. And after 1 year, the defense basically threatened a mutiny because they actually wanted someone who was going to coach them. They didn't want to deal with that.
Working pretty well in Philly. Probably the best defense in the league.
So I would say like this: number 1 for me is Vrabel. Part of me really wants to believe that he was willing to take the job last year after Harbaugh got the Chargers job, and that he would come here. You know, I think he's going to have offers, and seeing how Saturday went, his alma mater might even be one of those. So he's probably one for me. I'm with Liam Cohen as well. Liam Cohen is, I think, the guy where it's just like the Jets weren't able to get Mike Vrabel, Zach Taylor, Stefanski stayed put, and it's just like, all right, you know, Woody's like, we went defense last time, we want to go offense. You just hear that he crushed the interview. Like, it's just one of those things where he just starts to get a lot of momentum, and you can see like, oh, and then like a year goes by and you just look at the Jets and it's like, wow, the Jets had a retread quarterback, whoever it was, and they won 8 games, and like all the vibes are just so much different because they have an offensive coordinator that actually just allowed them to have fun and actually gave them a baseline that they haven't seen on offense. So he's probably 2. I would say Aaron Glenn for me. I was probably put Flores 3. I probably put Aaron Glenn 4. This is nothing to do with like Aaron Glenn, like the person. I think and it's also someone who deserves a head coaching job. He certainly does. It is really the thing for Dan Campbell's like, is Dan Campbell just like a one-of-one guy? Like, is he just completely unconventional in his own way, and that, you know, or that entire staff is basically 90% former players? Like, just how much his players love that. Anytime he can talk about it, and Aaron Glenn can do this too, which is important, it's just like, he's lived it. He's been there. Like, this isn't a guy who, like, was the quarterback of Miami, Ohio, and then, you know, was a GA in college for 3 years, and then got a he got a pro job where he was, like, a quality control coach, and this did, like, that. Like, that's not Dan Campbell. That's not Aaron Glenn. And also part of me, which is the sadist in me, if the Jets are the team that it was in the middle of a 15-year playoff drought, hires Aaron Glenn, a beloved former player, and it works out to like a Remember the Titans like movie, like that doesn't happen to the Jets. Like, it just doesn't. Like, I'm sorry to say, like, it just doesn't happen to us. Like that can happen to any other franchises. Jets aren't one of them. And then 5, I'd probably say Todd Monken because I think he does actually have to take a job. I think like everyone loves he's not going to go here pick over Adam Gase. Where else is he going to go? Like, I do think a guy.
He's like 60. What is he? 61.
I think he's 58. I think he isn't quite 60.
But still, like, he's not.
He's not going to have.
He's not a 40-year-old coordinator anymore.
Correct, and I think part I could really see the Jets looking at the market and be like, wow, we really are, you know, snake bitten in a way where like the young coordinators don't want to have their first job to be here, and Mike Vrabel and the couple of the experienced guys have better options, and we're like, you know, do we have to? And Monken looks at the thing. It's just like, well, these young coordinators have surpassed me. The Ravens offense wasn't as good this year as it was last year. If that happens again, have I completely missed the boat? So those would probably be my 5. In that regard, I'd like to hear what Dan does. If there's more defensive guys on Dan's thing, because I know where Dan likes to skew his side of the ball.
You know, it's funny you should say that. No, I think my list is basically the same. I love Vrabel. I think, again, he's just got to be the top option in terms of all the things that he needs to bring, or that he can bring to the organization. It's the most balanced candidate that they can get. I think we've talked about that plenty. I really like Monken. I think it's an interesting situation because I think that as much as we've said, like, he wouldn't take it exactly like what you just said, me. There might not be anything else, but also at the same time, like, I don't know. I think that a lot of the fears that we've had about like what coaches have to go through in this organization, he also kind of wouldn't put up with, like he's had enough experience that he would be in a room like that and just be like, well, cool, that's a nice suggestion, but also shut the hell up. I'm going to do whatever I want.
He's worked
that,
for Kirby. He's worked for Gundy. He's worked for some characters.
Exactly. And he's held his own. So it's like, this guy understands how to work in these environments. So I think that would work out. And I think maybe perhaps Woody would just pull the card and be like, yo, everything was different then when you interviewed. Like, you know what? Everything's cool now. Don't even worry about it. Don't even think about that gaze time. We messed up. Like, just come through. Everything's going to be fine. You never know how that would go over with him. I think Aaron Glenn's interesting. You are right. That wouldn't. That those stories don't tend to work out with the Jets. But yeah, I think it's an interesting situation. I think he had pretty decent experience with the Saints that he could bring some of that good experience, and again, the good experience he's had with Detroit over in terms of just building a mature franchise. But I think we've seen. I like there's like little drop offs and little hints of things that are like, hey, maybe. When the Saints let him go, like, did things continue in the same trajectory? Like, was there a DB room the same after he left? And and I think what he's done with, of course, Branch and everybody over in Detroit has been awesome. Brian Flores, I like. The one point with Brian Flores is I think that if anyone's going to teach you how to deal with quarterbacks, it's Kevin O'Connell. Like, I think we saw a little bit on Netflix, like just the way that he deals with his players in general, like. He's literally the opposite, and so it was such a good decision for him to go there and just learn, like, oh, this is how you talk to people. Because I think that's the one part of his brain that he just hasn't been able to connect is just like being a person in football, which is tough.
Relating on a human level to people that don't play linebacker and defensive back.
Exactly. Okay. Before I talk about just a quick thing on coordinators, real quick. One person did float this, and I don't think it'll happen, but. I do find it funny that this happens every offseason for some reason. If Shanahan happens to be available for trade for some dumb reason, of course you trade the entire franchise.
Yeah, you like. I don't care what pick they have this year, even if it's 1-1. I would trade it for Kyle Shanahan.
Everything.
I will understand the day 2 running back pick he makes every year. I'd be like, okay, cool, don't care. Don't care.
Oh, the 7th round dude with 27 college carries. There was a 3rd string running back at Auburn. Probably going to be an all-pro in year 1.
Exactly. The one thing I wanted to mention for just thinking about coordinators, if they do get a young offensive coach, please hire Jim Leonard. I know there's I know there's less stuff going on. I know he had to like take a year off, I think, at what point, but. The one connection that I, for some reason, I never thought about making, the 1 year Illinois secondary was insane, and they sent like a bunch of players to the draft. He just happened to be in the building. Yeah. Now the Broncos defense looks incredible, one of the best defenses in the NFL. Again, he just happens to be right there. All these like past teams of Wisconsin too were dominant. Like, he's been doing this for a while, and he's just kind of chilling. Like, you gotta let him take the reins and see what happens. That's one of their the best former Jet court. Matter of fact, I think. Well, okay, let me chill. Aaron Glenn's great, but
yeah, I'm gonna throw a few names at you guys real quick, and then I want to float 2 more ideas before we wrap here. Again, I don't want to not talk about. I'll talk more about the midweek pod about kind of the game and just some of the film and kind of what the roster looks like. We're gonna do 1 roster question and 1 quarterback question at the end. But I'm just gonna throw a few names at you. If the Jets interview for head coaching jobs, what your reaction will be if you see the tweet come through. If the Jets interview Josh McCown as a head coaching candidate, I'm not even talking offensive coordinator because I think that's probably the feasible next jump. But this is a guy who probably would have gotten the Texans job had the climate been a little different. Like, I think the Texans pretty clearly want to hire him. And then the fact that they were dealing with like a quarterback who's whatever, we're not going to go down this whole route. But like, there was a lot going on with the Texans at the time that they really couldn't hire McCown. But it felt like everything you read pretty clearly they wanted McCown to be the head coach, having 0 experience. They were just like, in the last few years, he's gotten that experience. Not saying he's the most deserving, but what was your reaction, Dan? I'll start with you, then Meegs, B. If you see the tweet, Jets interviewing conducted an interview with Josh McCown, whatever the stupid fucking tweet is. What would your reaction be if you saw that pop up on your timeline?
Meegs, you want to go?
Oh, you want me to go for this one? To me, this is the move that people talk about with Rex. That I'm like, if you want to make the fan base happy, just do it, but be a little different. That's kind of my thing with McCown, where it's just like if Josh McCown got hired, like I think he wouldn't call plays. He'd be a CEO. He'd be just like a personable guy. I feel good about him with a young quarterback because he was basically that guy in the quarterback room for 15 years. It's a very easy way to talk yourself into. I think it's very easy to talk yourself into Josh McCown as like a wild card candidate. If said more jobs open, the Jets really don't have options. The doomsday scenario happens where like Woody is really, really involved and like it's completely like scared off the coaching market in a way where you kind of have to like as a wild card home run swing. I think you can easily talk yourself into it, and I think the fan base would really get behind it because is there a player who has a higher approval rating in the past 5 to 7-ish years than Josh McCown? Like, who has anything bad to say about Josh McCown? Show yourself.
I 100% agree. It's almost like he could probably run for president. He probably get a pretty decent amount of votes. He's just, like he's got a great personality. Every room he's in, people love him, and it's hard to do that. Like it's legitimately hard to do that in the NFL because people just hate you for no reason. Sam Darnold project. Look, man, like we knew like, and this for some reason happens to just be 2 instances that we're very, very well familiar with of him doing it with the Jets as a player and now doing it as a coach. But like, that's a pretty damn good job, man. And it's like, that's hard stuff. People have gotten head coach jobs out of that type of experience gain. So like, would not be mad at it. Of course, you want to make sure like everything around him is in a solid place. Again, Meeks mentioned play calling. Don't know if that's something he'd be ready for yet. But again, like Flores, he's learning everything he needs to learn from the experience that he's getting right now because of that Kevin O'Connell situation. So, yeah, it'd be hard to not be happy about it, but it'd be depressing knowing that this quarterback draft is not that great.
I think my reaction would be it's probably a year early at a minimum, but there's other guys that I'm about to one name. If I see the Bobby Slowick has conducted his interview with the Jets, I will be reporting the tweet. I will be reporting abuse. I will be blocking the account. I don't even think you could block accounts anymore on Twitter, but if you could, I would do it. I literally didn't pick the Texans to go further because I felt like CJ Stroud is not the same player in 2024 that he was in 23, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them being their offense sucks as a scheme and whatever. I mean, if they like, that's one of the names that I think I would be really, really pissed off if he was in a final contention. The other one this is a big wild card, and just hear me on this one. The Ravens defense has been horrible this year for sure. But why do I feel like people are going to be like, oh, it's the Ravens. Let's give Zach Orr an interview. No. How about that? How about no? They're the worst pass defense in the NFL. No. So it's not even like, I guess, a react. It's more of like, to me, I'd like to see the Jets be because of what they're doing with Spielman, Tannenbaum, and the 33rd team. I'd like to see them, cast a wide net, sure, right? A McCown, you throw out maybe one college guy, maybe you call on, and just to give perspective on all these different things. It's a Jim Leonard. Why don't you give Jim Leonard a head coaching interview and McCown and a head coaching interview to basically be like, we really just want to get you in the building and get a feel for you so we can see if you'd be ready to be a DC and OC here. But there's also names like that I don't want the Jets to get too cute with like the too far of a net. Like, don't lose focus too much. Like, it's pretty obvious where the strong candidates are. I don't know if you guys feel this. I feel this with GM too, where I'm okay with let's take a shot here. Let's take a shot here and bring a guy in the building. And if at a minimum we get to know him. But I get worried sometimes when you get too ADHD a little bit. I don't know how you guys feel on that. And I want to just throw 2 things at you before we wrap.
Yeah,
Meeks, if you want to take that, and then
yeah.
Dan
I
can
guess
finish
I
it.
will say, and of course, it's funny that everything came down basically to two coaches who got fired. One after 3 years, and the other one after 3 years and 4 games at the Jets. But their coaching search the last time I actually thought was well done, and where it was like, they hired the obvious people, like said Salah, like everyone made a huge gripe that he didn't get the Browns job and went to Stefanski after the 49ers cooked the Vikings in that playoff game and everything. So he was like an easy like coordinator hire that everyone was high on. Dable because of his development with Josh Allen, Arthur Smith, like Ryan Tannehill was literally getting like top 5 EPA quarterback play like 2 years running, even what he did with Derrick Henry. So like, but they also interviewed Aaron Glenn back then when he was just the secondaries coach for the Saints. They also interviewed Joe Brady, who had 1 year of coordinator experience, where they actually did the thing where like, I don't think they were going to hire those guys, or I don't think they were like super serious on the list. But I actually like that they were willing to pick the brains of those kind of players, which is where I would kind of feel about like Minter. I think is now getting too much, where I actually think he could get a job after 1 year. But like, that's the perfect candidate where you're like, I just want to hear what that guy thinks about football, because clearly he's doing something right. Like, I think,
and good organizations have a guy come in the building, and even if they don't hire him, maybe they bring up an idea of like, wow, that was interesting. I never looked at something like that. Why don't I?
Like, I don't want to hire Wes Phillips, who's Kevin O'Connell's OC, but I love to pick that guy's brain. Just be like, what does Kevin O'Connell do that's so special, and like, how has that made you a better coach?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's funny because some teams actually in doing that, they found like one guy that they're like, oh, actually, hold on, like like this actually is the guy, and like maybe we should hire him, and that's how the process should be. And for the Jets, like, let's say that Vrabel actually gives you some positive responses, like keep interviewing for this exact reason. Like, give him some options in terms of like, hey, this person actually interviewed really well, and their ideas might mesh with yours, because like I like love Vrabel. I don't know what type of staff he's going to want to put together. If you give him some ideas, it might get the ball rolling a little bit in the direction that you want it to go. So, yeah, all that. It's always good to cast a wide net with reason, like you said.
Yeah, I want to just wrap a couple things here, and then I want Meeks to kind of fire out a take here that I think that isn't the craziest thing I've ever heard. I don't even know how realistic it would even be, but I think we're always, CR's drunk Rex take might actually come true. I'll just say this on Rex quickly.
I'll tell you that.
No, I'll say this quickly. I love Rex's passion for the Jets. I love what he did here, and all that's great. I do enjoy how Mangini and Rex get all the credit, and Mike T gets dragged through because he throws out crazy trade proposals on a hot take show. But definitely didn't build those teams at all. He had nothing to do with it. It was just Rex and Mangini. The biggest reason, and I don't want to talk more than 2 seconds on this unless it really does happen, but the reason that I don't think Rex's makes sense is that unless you're going full ridiculous 1 year, like you were going Rodgers back here and everything, and it was like lightning in a bottle, Rex is going to basically just have these guys play like lunatics. If they're like, the reason you would hire Rex is like, hey, if he gets a good OC and a good GM and he just has to be the coach and do the defense. Well, guess who the Jets are probably getting if they have a good GM and they get a good OC? They probably have Mike Vrabel. They probably have Liam Cohen. Or they probably have Brian Flores, because those guys are top-tier candidates who would attract a good GM and attract a good OC.
Yep.
So that's all I want to say on that. A couple of different roster notes just real quick. It seems like CJ Mosley's probably played his last down of football, let alone with the Jets. It's a real shame. It's nothing. It's nothing official yet. I'm sure CJ is going to probably try to gut it out and come back at some point, but it's not great. It's neck and back stuff, which we saw with Tyron Smith. It's probably it for Tyron, who's going to walk into the Hall of Fame, and CJ's going to get on the ballot. I don't know if he'll ever get in. Maybe he's a down the line guy, but been a great Jet. It sucks that it might be over and he'll never get a chance to play in a playoff game here. I know he got paid a lot of money and no one's feeling bad for him, but he went through a lot of shit here, and I felt like it was like the bright spot to watch on Sundays. A lot of times, him and Quincy were for those couple of years in 22 and 23. It was like that was pretty special watching those two guys run around. I think we all kind of feel that way. Last thing here, Meeks is going to throw out this take. the bridge quarterback question around the Jets is probably the most. Look, Tyrod's going to be here. I think Tyrod's probably the betting favorite theoretically to be the starter next year. Whether they go rookie in round 1, if they get high enough, maybe they do take a rookie. If maybe it's a guy in round 2, round 3. I'd love Sam to be back here. It doesn't feel like that's likely, because if Sam stays in Minnesota, Meeks potentially has an idea of a name. And just before Meeks does do this, we talked about the wide net. The reason I wanted to bring Meeks' idea up was because I think if you're the Jets, whether these teams have zero interest or not, I'm calling Dallas, I'm calling Jacksonville, I'm calling Indy, I'm calling name any team with a quarterback who they're not sure on yet. Is there a regime change? Is that it doesn't matter who it is. I'm calling, hey, Seattle, are you going to cut Geno? Obviously, again, most of these are unrealistic. Dallas isn't realistic to trade Dak. But I'm calling on all these guys. I'm calling Atlanta and being like, hey, you got to pay Kirk. What are you doing with Penix? Because he's got to play. He's 25 years. So one name I haven't mentioned, Meeks, I'll let you take the floor here. I don't know how realistic it is. It's probably extremely unrealistic, but it's the right thinking in my head of, hey, can we kind of solve this rebuild quicker, but not totally cheat the process?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this morning where I was just like, the Vikings are not having they're having a nice year. The Vikings are 10-2. If the Lions weren't, 11-1, I think, or I forget when the Lions had their bye. They might not. They might only be 10-1. But that's and Sam's playing well. I mean, I think Paul and Will said this. Paul said this in our chat. Will said on the pod tonight that I think said Donald's had over 100 passer rating, and I think it's 12 of his 13 games. He's playing really well, and you've seen this kind of happen now in Seattle with Geno and then Tampa with Baker, where they have this, the 1 year guy they take the flyer on as they try to figure out the retool, the rebuild, and then it was actually pretty fun playing with him, and they'll probably just appreciate getting 2 years of guaranteed money. Do you run this back? And Vikings have something that Seattle didn't have and Tampa didn't have, so they took a quarterback in the top 10. And I was thinking Sam Darnold's never going to be bad if Kevin O'Connell's his quarterback. If Kevin O'Connell's his head coach. You don't worry about, I don't think Jared Goff is going to fall off a cliff if Ben Johnson leaves, but I never have to answer myself that question in Minnesota because Kevin O'Connell's the head coach. So the hypothetical.
Sam's way more talented and younger and cheaper than what Goff is in Detroit.
So I was thinking the Jets win 2 more games. They beat Jacksonville. Unfortunately, what happened to Trevor this weekend, if they're just going to shut him down. The Jets finally avenge and beat Mac Jones for once, which I actually would be fine seeing that. And if they beat Miami, because Miami's just cratering, and they're picking 11th. What if you call me this time and be hey, JJ McCarthy in a 4th round pick? What do you say? I think that could happen. I think JJ is young. JJ is young. He's younger than Bo Nix was 25. Michael Penix was 25. I said Caleb and Drake were young. Jane Daniels, I think, was 24. They're old. They were old. JJ McCarthy was a true junior. I don't think he's turned 22 yet. And it's more just, is that better than giving Daniel Jones or Justin Fields 1 year, $8 million, Tyrod, and taking Jackson Dart or Garrett Nussmeier in the 2nd round, and then Tyrod mentors the kid. You let Fields or Jones or ex-veteran play and see if you can win 7 or 8 ball games. Is this a way where you can cheat the process? I don't know if Minnesota would do it. I don't know if the Jets are going to be good enough because I'm not offering pick 4 for him. If we're in the Travis Hunter, Mason Graham sweepstakes, I'd like to stay there personally. But you can make an argument JJ McCarthy would be QB1 in this draft.
Dan, what are your thoughts? And I'll wrap it on. I'll wrap it there.
So you're right, and 100% you can make that argument. But man, I don't know. It's tough. I feel like it's still a heavy price for me. I don't know. I feel like it might be unfair, but for JJ McCarthy,
doesn't he feel like a Vrabel guy though?
He does. That's the
Harbaugh
thing.
Loves that kid. That means something to a lot of people.
So cringy, but it works.
Yes, it's almost so. The phrase that comes to mind for some reason, I don't know why, is a possession quarterback. And
Yes.
as much as I'm that's annoying and kind of boring, and you want to be exciting. That's actually where the NFL's going. So like that's why my entire body is fighting this right now. It's like it is kind of what's happening. Like you want a quarterback who's like not going to turn the ball over, make responsible decisions, and like yes, he can be a little risk adverse, and like you don't know like if he's going to push the ball downfield. Like no, he's just never been that type of position or that type of offense to make that happen. But like, I mean, you're like if you want somebody who's going to be responsible and like you have a balanced offense, you have a really good running back that you want to build your offense around, or like you have a really good star receiver that you can get the ball to and who's going to be open and create separation, like it actually isn't terrible.
He has more Baker tendencies than I think people realize.
I mean, this dude meditates with that shoes on because
yeah,
that one that might not go over well. It might be a stare situation. I will say this, Meegs, I think the thinking is correct. I don't know what Minnesota's going to do. I actually think it's probably a top 3 topic in the offseason on any level of what they do at quarterback because the roster is only going to get better. And if you're Minnesota, theoretically in this conversation, right, let's just say it's even pick 8 because I think the draft falls off pretty quickly here. Between pick 8 and 30 is like, I'm not sure that there's the biggest difference in a lot of these guys. There is a difference, but whatever. Let's say if you knew you're going to miss on Hunter and Graham and even Carter and whatever. If you're Minnesota in the same light, like, I don't know, wouldn't it be nice to have Will Campbell and Darisaw as like your tackles? Or if you're Minnesota, you're like, I don't know, man, like if Flores doesn't get a job and he's back here one more year, like, do we try to talk ourselves into like Grenard and Carter as our edges? And like, we basically turn JJ McCarthy into Sam Darnold and Abdul Carter. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's where you that would be my only thinking. I don't know, again, what the Jets will do. I know, Connor and Joe mentioned Levis. Levis is one of the most confusing ones because I'm not sure New York's a great spot for him. I know he's from the area, but I kind of think Levis is better than people nationally realize, but I'm not sure he's actually good either. Like I honestly have no idea. I can't wait for the Raiders to talk themselves into Aiden O'Connell.
They're taking Shador.
That to me
they're taking Shador.
Hey,
God is great.
Listen, it'll be a lot of interesting conversations around quarterback just because this quarterback class is hysterically funny. Jalen Milroe at 7 really would put me in a bad mood. Yeah, I'll tell you that. Jalen Milroe pick 40. Hey, we're having a nice conversation. I'm down. I'm down to get crazy at pick 40. Pick 7. You better have hired like McCown, Vrabel, and Jim Leonard all on the same staff. And now I can have a better conversation about that. But Meegs and Dan, I obviously appreciate you kind of hopping on here again. I'll have more Seahawks and more kind of present day conversation on the pod again. Just to wrap here, unfortunately, it looks like Rodgers. Unfortunately, however you feel about it, this is going to be a 1-year thing in terms of on the field. We talked a little Mosley, talked a little Tyron. Obviously, talked some head coaching stuff, some crazy draft stuff, some GM stuff we'll get to later on. The GM stuff's a little harder to talk about just because I'm not sure what the direction the Jets will go. I mean, I threw out a list that I think covers a lot of different things, but at the same time, might not match up at all with what Tannenbaum and Rick are thinking. And then in the end, we really don't know. Dan will be on Buck the Trend. Draft season's going to be starting up soon. Meegs is going to be in full force. Am I missing anything else? I know Connor and Joe had this stuff on the pod from yesterday. I think they have War Room and all that stuff. Did I miss any plugs here? I'm sure that I missed something.
No, I think me and Dave
are
back this week, so I think we're excited about that.
Oh, there we go. Let's go.
So you should see that in your feeds. I know Dan said I'm sure Dan will have some good stuff for us on Friday, but I think that's the only thing I really wanted to plug. Dan, what you got?
I was going to say, I just realized that none of us mentioned Cliff Kingsbury, and I think we all did it on purpose. But sorry.
Not only did I do it on purpose,
speaking of,
I went out of my way.
Yeah.
The Cliff thing to me is.
The Jets
I have a non-starter from the aspect.
They've had too many.
It's just the Jets went the handsome coordinator route. Like, just don't do it. It doesn't work. I need someone to come in here that's either gonna punch you in the face and could beat up at least everybody in the locker room and actually mean it in Vrabel, or I need someone to come in here and be like, I played corner, I don't want to fight you, but my team will fight you. Like I need that.
Right.
Last quick question here before we wrap. Sorry. Aziz Al-Shaair, was hit dirty, yes or no?
Yeah.
Because Texans fans are being extremely sensitive.
Yes. Like,
I think he's gonna. My gut is he's gonna get a 6-game suspension, and they're going to make a full example out of him. I don't know why. I just have this weird feeling he's gonna get like an egregious amount of games where everyone's like freaking out, and then it's gonna get reduced. Eddie Jackson got 4 games for a personal foul.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, he was trying to still fight after the fact. Like you can put the Twitter
This
post.
dude cashed out for 10 minutes right after.
Yeah, like you can do the notes app all you want. Like you still want your helmet was off and you were trying to fight Brandon Scherf like 5 minutes later. Like
it's the 3rd time in 2 years.
Yeah, so
it's insane. You've seen red for sure. Yeah.
If CJ Stroud got hit like that, we'd have the National Guard. If the Texans had more fans. Sorry, they're just the building's empty too much. It's bothersome.
DJ like that? Come on, man.
I know. It's unfortunate, but no, I appreciate you for listening. We'll be back. I'll be back on the feed Thursday again, Wednesday, Meegs and Dan on draft season, Buck the Trend. Joe and Connor on the regular feed. The other guys out earlier today. I'll be back shamelessly. Also, please listen to all 32. We talked some Jets this week, amongst other things. Appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you guys soon.